Hey buckos, did you clean your room today? We're about to hop into another Jordan B. Peterson reaction video. Before we do that, I need you to go down and click like and subscribe right now. Once you've done that, we're gonna get right into it. Cheers.
I want to talk about oppression for a moment, if you don't mind.
Sure.
I'm going to play a little clip here from one of your lectures so that we're really grounded in what you said.
You're oppressed, you're oppressed, you're oppressed, you're oppressed. God only knows why. Maybe you're too short, or you're not as beautiful as you could be, or your grandparent was a serf, likely, because almost everybody's great-grandparent was. It's like, and you're not as smart as you could be, and you have a sick relative, and you have your own physical problems, and it's like, frankly, you're a mess. And you're oppressed in every possible way, including your ancestry and your biology, and the entire sum of human history has conspired to produce victimized you with all your individual pathological problems. It's like, yes, true.
Do you ever worry that saying something like that might create a false equivalency between different kinds of oppression?
No, because I'm not willing to view the world through the oppression identity politics lens.
Yeah.
And I think the fact that we do that virtually reflexively now is extraordinarily dangerous. And even if there are ethnic differences in historical oppression on some timescales, which is undoubtedly true, that doesn't mean that we divide people into tribes now and we assign blame for those historical iniquities. All it'll do is tribalize us, and you can see that happening like mad in the West and in Europe right now. It's very dangerous.
I grew up in Toronto, and I'm just speaking from the perspective of someone who experienced, sort of systemic racial prejudice everywhere I went. That's my framework. I don't know if it's neo-Marxism or postmodernism, or if it's just my reality.
I mean, there's arbitrary obstacles standing in people's way. Some of those have to do with gender, some of them have to do with race and prejudice and bias and all that. But the landscape around us with regards to those things is improving very rapidly. It's much better than it has been in the past. And I still think that the proper way to construe the situation is to look to yourself as an individual. The fact that there are still places where prejudice is a problem is self-evident. People are tribal by nature. But we don't contend with it by turning to an identity politics view of the world. It's not going to help. And I see Trudeau doing that all the time. To return to your initial question, I don't think he has any idea what sort of fire he's playing with.
So if you don't know, Justin Trudeau is the Prime Minister of Canada, which is where Jordan Peterson is from and where this interview is also from.
When I see that tweet from Justin Trudeau, I see a guy who's saying like, hey, it's great to see all these women out in solidarity supporting equal rights for women. And
he wasn't supporting equal rights. He was supporting equality of outcome. And he was the same person who formulated his cabinet. It was one of his first acts as leader to ensure that his cabinet was 50% women and 50% men, despite the fact that only 25% of the elected people were women.
That's true.
He selected his cabinet on the basis of their genitalia.
And with regards to 1 in 5 social scientists identifying as a Marxist, there's this professor, I think his name is Wolf. He put a challenge up on YouTube to me a couple of weeks ago to debate him. And what did he say? He said, he criticized my criticism of Marx. He said, well, at Peterson, he's basically stuck in 1989. It's like, we've progressed way past the time of the Stalinists. It's like, and I thought, well, how about if a Nazi said that? Just out of curiosity. It's like, well, it's not 1945, anymore. It's like us National Socialists. We've progressed way past what happened in Nazi Germany. It's like we should don't be stuck in the past, right? It's time to give us another chance. It's like, well, how about no?
I just read a paper that said that mathematics is whiteness. I didn't know that mathematics could have a race.
Yeah, but the thing is, there's nothing illogical about these claims once you accept this central axioms. The axioms are straightforward. The world is a battleground of power hierarchies. That's what it is. There isn't anything else outside of that. And each power hierarchy generates its own internal narrative, including rules for what constitutes evidence, that support and buttress the structure of that hierarchy. And because the hierarchies exclude, then it's in the best interests of the people who are excluded to invert the hierarchy. And of course, they also regard that as just, even though that's part of the incoherence of the entire argument. That's where they have to turn to Marxism. But make no mistake about it, this isn't accidental. It isn't people misunderstanding what constitutes evidence. Not at all.
120 years. I assume you agree with female suffragists that women should have a vote. Well, 120 years ago...
It's a good assumption.
120 years ago, I felt I had to check. 120 years ago, that would have been a radical and disruptive idea to have. People would have advanced exactly the arguments you advance about inherited social traditions, about the way things have been done. Scientists would have advanced information. A phrenologist would have come along, I don't doubt, and said, well, you know, women's bump of electoral selection is smaller than men.
So if you don't know, phrenology was a science which has been debunked as a pseudoscience. And I believe what it did is it looked at the structure of the skull and inferred that the size of and functioning of different regions of the brain was larger, smaller, based on the structure of the skull. And that was used to justify certain elements of like racism and sexism. That has since been disproved. So he's saying that back in the day, you know, arguments against women's suffrage might have quoted phrenology.
They wouldn't have advanced any of the arguments.
They would.
No, they wouldn't.
Yes.
They would have advanced their own timely misinterpretations of the situation, but those don't bear any resemblance to what I'm putting forward.
They bear a strong resemblance to me.
In what way?
Because you're drawing on what has been done as some endorsement of what is done in the future.
Why is the description of the fact that consciousness has been described mythologically as masculine an endorsement of it? The fact that I'm pointing out something exists in the world isn't an endorsement of it, any more than me pointing out that hierarchies exist is an endorsement of it.
But I think you're being a tiny bit disingenuous, because there is a sense of endorsement in the sense that you think we shouldn't struggle against this in our social arrangements. Anyway, sorry, I interrupted Louise O'Neill.
I was really interested there when you said that we can't blame culture for inequality within it. So
that's absolutely the case.
So
inequality is rife in the animal world.
Okay.
Well, so how do you blame that on human culture or the West?
You don't, but why?
Yeah, I mean,
we're not animals.
Yes.
For starters, we're not animals.
Well, I'm not justifying that. I'm saying that, look, there is lots of problems with the fact that there are hierarchies, but the problems with the fact of hierarchies are far deeper than you can use a sociological explanation.
But shouldn't we tackle them? Shouldn't we attempt to tackle them rather than just explaining them or, you know, describing them or giving them gendered identities? Wouldn't it be better to actually say,
well, first of all, we don't give them gendered identities.
How can we enact real social change?
That's a certain perfectly reasonable question.
As I said at the beginning, there's a great deal in the book of Jordan with which I agree with, but let's just deal with this point I disagree with you, where you talk about functional hierarchies. You say that they're based on competence rather than power, and therefore actually that what we shouldn't be looking at when we're looking at functional hierarchies is sort of, we need to move away from victimhood, start working on your competence, and the power structures will be functioning in some way for you. But then I just don't understand and follow that, because how do you then explain so much mediocrity in places where there are so many people who clearly don't have the competence and yet are in positions of power, in positions of authority, in positions in which they're dominating purely by an accident of birth through the connections and networks that they have. And finally, the bar, for example, my profession as a barrister, is one of those bizarre ironies that when you're in the profession itself, it's probably one of the most meritocratic professions, because once you stand up in front of a judge, you better have the answer. Nobody cares about who your father is. But getting there is the least meritocratic, because actually so much will have to have happened to you in order to get there. But actually being in there, it really is about how good you are, determines how far you go. And so that's an example of functional hierarchies at one end clearly being dominated by accident of birth and power, but in the other by competence. And to ignore the two is just very simplistic, wouldn't you say?
Definitely.
So a thought right there, it's like one end is, he's saying that, okay, one side of law, once you're done the bar and then onward, is meritocratic, but the opportunities leading up to it to go to like a really good high school, really good college or law or university, and then a really good school for your law degrees after your undergrad, like there's a lot of that isn't meritocratic. And that's true, but the thing is, like, maybe one thing could be said is, he's not emphasizing the degree to which you have control over your environment, over your network, over your opportunities. He said, you know, things happen to you before that. But really, like, you can emphasize the extent to which you can make things happen.
Definitely. Well, I mean, the evolutionary biologists have already established that in human hierarchies, there's two routes to success, let's say, power and competence. And degenerate hierarchies use power as the means of establishing.
So you're saying people have corrupted it?
Well, hierarchies in general tilt towards corruption. So that would be the motif of the tyrannical king. It's a very old idea. And one of the things that people have to do as individuals is fight against the fact that tyrannies tend towards corruption.
So when you and, say, Sam Harris argue about religion, you're arguing about fundamentally different things, it sounds like. His conception of what is religious is very different from yours.
Yeah, well, he tends to think of religious thought the same way that a smart 13-year-old atheist thinks about a fundamentalist Christian. It's like, yeah, okay. You're just not getting to the heart of the matter. You know, and I just finished reading all of Sam's books in the last couple of weeks. And as far as I'm concerned, he doesn't ever get to the bottom of the issue. He doesn't address the fundamental thinkers. There are some profound thinkers. Dostoevsky's one, Tolstoy, Nietzsche, Jung, it's like they're completely absent from, and the same with Dawkins. It's completely absent. All that conceptualization is completely absent from their corpus of works. They don't even have an understanding for the psychological utility of religion.
And for that, you can watch Jordan Peterson's The Psychological Significance of the Biblical series. Check that shit out. It's really cool.
And it's a big problem. You know, you don't get to be an atheist when the people you attack are like naive fundamentalists. And I have some sympathy for the naive fundamentalists. It's like what they're basically saying is something like this. Look, we have an ethos that's valuable. You scientist types are casually dismantling it. What the hell are we supposed to do? Well, the fundamentalists don't know what to do about that. So they say, well, creationism is science. It's like, well, no, it's not. But that doesn't mean that they don't have a point. Their point is there's something valuable here. It's like, don't break it casually. What are you going to replace it with? The new atheists wish that everybody becomes rational. It's like, yeah, sure, that's going to happen.
All right, thank you guys for checking this out. We're going to be doing more. Before you go, please click like and subscribe below. Your support is 100% appreciated. And we're going to come back with more Jordan B. Peterson reaction videos. Let's check this out. Thank you.